I think to live is to try to understand what is to be human. In the process, we gather experience. Every experience builds who you are, so someone can know or expect your actions to be aligned to that experience that we share together, if I know you very well. But sometimes life throws something at you that is so new, or you are in a different place in your head that puts you off track of who you used to be. You can know someone very well and they can know you very well. But if something that has never happened to you or to that person ever, not even close mentally or emotionally, or doesn't matter what it is, how do you know how each of you are going to behave? Have you ever had an experience where you react in a way that you never thought you would?
And you see them and you suddenly, there's something called the situation where this facade breaks, right? And that's called the situation. And so I think that when you know somebody, you're definitely mostly dealing with the persona. And I think that there are instances in close friends or when you're in intimate situations with a significant other where that breaks down. There's a moment of, or successive moments of vulnerability where I think you get a glimpse, at least, into that person behind the mask.
Taken aback by your own reaction. There's something that sometimes something happens to you and you go like, I never thought I was going to react that way.
But I do think for the most part, you're dealing with, I mean, maybe I just haven't gotten close enough with anybody to really see the mask come down. But I think it's definitely in moments of vulnerability, especially in moments where somebody is telling you a truth about themselves that they're not comfortable with.
I don't need to necessarily have like an emotional breakdown, but if it's organized in my mind and I've like had time to overthink it, don't you think that then that's still the context of persona?
I think it depends how much time you've had to organize it. If you've asked me a question and I've thought about it, it could be because I've overthought it, in which case I would agree with you. If it comes to a point where I would give you some contrived cousin of the actual truth, I could still deliver that information to you in a way where it was packaged within my persona. I'm maintaining a straight face, a calm disposition.
What is to know someone fully? And even be surprised by yourself. It's a way of us comprehending the whole. If we think about sound, if we hear everything that is around us, we can go mad. So we learn to filter. So I think time is the same. So I think in a way we learn to organize things in order to make our lives easier. And it looks easier if time is linear. So yes, I think it's much easier to understand, to put in a box so we can kind of contain the data and understand it better. It feels more palpable.
Because you've spoken about time in this way, it also makes me think about emotional and psychological maturity. Because how many times have I learned something, and despite knowing what I know, returned to the old mechanisms, the old way of existing, of being, and had to relearn what I've already known. So sometimes we forget that we already have knowledge, and we go back and then return to a point in which we've already been and take a little bit of a step forward, hopefully. But time is not really working in this kind of linear way, especially in this kind of psychological maturity.
It's a bit like, I think, geology. You have a river, and then the river dries, so there's the sediment, and then let's say that something happens and brings some rocks on the top. And later, thousands and billions of years ago, then this solidified. It became something else, but this something else has two layers that are embedded. They can't be separated anymore. I think this time, in a way, there's the sense of three-dimensional.
It's the illusion of near future because there's so much uncertainty. So then the near future, is it just the illusion of the predicted near future of my mind?
Yeah, I agree. It's like music. When you listen to music, it calms you down because your brain always kind of predicting what's about to happen, and in a way it's kind of right because there is rhythm and there is harmony, so you kind of go with the flow. That's why I'm never really sure if there is present or only these near futures.
In that we are in a constant illusion of our mind.
People's memories are porous. You know, you can have an experience, but that experience sort of extends backwards and forwards in that, like, events future in your life will actually kind of affect the experience that you had in the past.
The macro and the micro are connected. So if you change the internal representation of something, the external also changes because you will take different actions.
And you're able to create new associations with memories through different kinds of, like, work in the mind.
If you want to summarize Jung's entire work into 4 words, these are the 4 words, is to value your inner life. And that sounds so simple. But I find that it is something that is so neglected, especially in the West, where everything that is valued is an external reality.
As far as we're concerned, especially in, like, the Western world, we could all just be a bunch of floating heads and no one would notice a difference. That sort of bodily integration. I feel like people are often misled here to believe that your brain is the only place where your consciousness lives, and that's just blatantly not true. More real and more in a moment and more living and alive when I don't even have anything going on in my brain and it's all just feeling happening, like, along this sort of spinal column down.
Placing a higher value on thoughts rather than feelings results in a corticocentric orientation in which there's this top-down bias emphasizing mental processes. And it minimizes the bottom-up feeling emanating from our bodies.
Trauma specialist Bezel van der Kolk explains that our sense of aliveness is based on our body's sensations. And to ignore, to push away those feelings that are very much in the insula and parietal brain leads you to start feeling dead.
The way I look at it too is like, your brain is only conscious of X amount of things at a time because it has to filter things down for your conscious rational survival or whatever you seem to think is that. Your body is also absorbing all of the same stimuli. It's going to be reacting to them too, so you have more than just your brain as a vehicle of sensing things around you. That's really connection to me. You know, that's like real feeling.
But simultaneously, while I do agree, has been an overemphasis on the top-down bias, rational mind over the feeling and embodied sensations, I would also like to really look into the balance of it. If I'm honest, yes, changing my life to value those feelings and to really listen to them has changed my life for the better. But when I feel fully alive, it's always in the midst of the two. It's never one or the other. So I also don't mean to demonize the other side. It's rather to encourage an equilibrium.
And the way we do it, by the way, is to value your inner life. What does that mean? It means value your dreams. A lot of people kind of discard them as the detritus of the day that happened before. Value your imagination. That's not fantasy. Right? Fantasy is where you direct in your mind, you're telling yourself a story about how you're a big star or whatever. That's fantasy. But the imagination is something I think artists work a lot with. They're images that come unfiltered. They seem to arise from God knows where, and they come into consciousness, and the way you work with it is by allowing the images to speak, not directing them, let them tell you what they want.
Artists almost having like a leg up sometimes on magicians in a sense, that these are people who are creating uninhibited and have the confidence to do so. Compared to most people who have sort of been suppressed in their creative instincts. The people who don't have the creative impulse is usually because it was bred out of them. That they're invalid in their innate human creativity. All human beings are creative beings. That's part of being human. When you don't believe you have those capacities, and when you believe that there is somebody else who's more qualified than you to do it, and you're trained from birth to submit, you see people who have these cultural views now that have been defined for them. All sort of taught slowly our whole lives what the barriers are, what the boundaries are, and what the expectations are.
By working with the inner images, what I found has happened is the individual changes. And one of the ways they change, which is why I value his work so much, is that they encounter the images that are related to their complexes. What is a complex? It's a charged feeling reaction you have when something inside of you is triggered. Maybe because of your past history. We all have past histories. We have emotional distress in our past. And whenever something comes up that resembles it, boom, it activates it. But what I think Jung, and especially a writer, James Hollis, what he says is, look, you have to act as if you're responsible for everything. We cannot take on the guilt of somebody else. We have to look at our own world and say, where am I projecting whatever it is I'm projecting? Now, this might seem like a small thing, but think about it this way. If you unearth your projections, you will stop burdening the world with these same things, right? It doesn't fit into your worldview, because you realize that all that is coming from some aspect of yourself that is not fully integrated, because in some way it is rejected by you, by the conscious mind. Have you ever tried changing the mind of someone who has a very strongly held belief? Well, you can't, because it's in their power. And what you're saying is, it's your power, your responsibility, and you must take the responsibility for the whole thing. And that is something a lot of people don't want to hear, because it means that you can no longer blame your partner for not being the perfect partner. You can't blame your kids for not living up to their potentials, because maybe they're your potentials. So it always takes it back to the individual.
Self is socially constructed, so it's always changing. Using it as your vehicle to operate as opposed to really identifying with it, right? If you really identify too hard with it, you're going to be in for a lot of hard times. When you do these sort of practices of visualizations and creative thinking practices, it does have a neurological effect on you as well, and it opens up other aspects of your life. My brain wasn't so compartmentalized. Things stopped becoming separate from each other and all became part of the same continuum.
We have both masculine and feminine forces within us. People get very upset when you're talking about men, women. We're not talking about men or women. Yin yang, that's probably less loaded.
I had this dream. I had this note in my hand, and every time I looked at them.
The active principle, the receptive principle.
Said, let yourself.
Here's a more loaded one: chaos and order. One thing that fairy tales teach you, which is so important, which dreams teach you as well, is don't think literally. Our stories are not meant to be taken literally. They're meant to be taken metaphorically. And the fairy tales are often telling you what is devalued in the general collective. We privilege action, doing, getting to the top of the mountain more than we do connecting to other people. And this is where I think a lot of the stress that we see right now, depression, is showing up. If you're not connected, there is something not functioning. And that is what it's trying to remind you. And that's why your own dreams are the guides that tell you, yes, this is where you need to look.
This dream. I had this note in my hand, and every time I looked at the note, it said, let yourself die. Then sometimes I close the note, I forget what it said. I had this dream. I had this note in my hand, and every time I looked at the note, it said, let yourself die. Then sometimes I close the note, I forget what it said, and it opened up again. It would say, you will die.
thing is, I'm not even sure if this is real, but I remember being 5 years old, and I was playing in some soccer game, and I just remember it was a later game, so it was dark, and there were trees beside the field, and I remember chasing. I don't even remember if I was chasing the ball or I was just running, but suddenly everything around me felt very blurry. The trees sort of melded together, and I felt like I was running at light speed, and I felt like I could run forever and not get tired. And it was this fleeting moment where I just felt like a pure awareness with everything around me. And for whatever reason, that image, that feeling, moment, even if it's not real, it stuck with me. It's one of those things where it's very bottom up, right? Nothing really happened. But it was just so vivid and so powerful, and it felt so real, which I get doesn't make a lot of sense, since everything you're experiencing is real, but like an altered state of consciousness where you're kind of hanging above yourself and aware of everything at once.